presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. The age of movies can properly be said to have begun in 1824, when Peter Marc Roget, inventor of the thesaurus, enunciated the theory of the persistence of vision. The magic lantern, long a popular parlor entertainment, was then provided with a crank, making possible the projection of multiple designs, like these two slides, revolving in opposite directions to produce the effect of animation. Zoetrope was one of the first and most popular of the moving picture toys. It appeared first in France, but soon was in parlors around the world. A series of cartoons capturing the different phases of a movement were placed inside the drum, and as the drum revolved, one peered through a slit and saw what appeared to be one moving figure. Slides illustrating well-known tales were shown by narrators. Here's the story of Rip Van Winkle. Rip and his scolding wife. Then Rip in the mountains. Rip as he awakes after his 20-year nap, and finally as he returns to the village to tell his story. The picture play used photographs rather than drawings, each successive photo carrying the story a step further. In this case, literally 2 steps. Black broke the action down to about 4 slides a minute, creating an illusion, at least suggesting, motion pictures. But the first true movies were shown in parlors, where for a penny, a customer could hand crank an individual machine and see a whole new world of motion, pictures that moved like life. Fun in a Chinese laundry so planted itself in the memory of director Joseph von Sternberg that 50 years later he used the title for his autobiography. Edison, inventor of kinetoscopes, was originally opposed to the idea of showing pictures on a screen. He thought it would use up audiences too fast. He changed his mind quickly, however, and headed one of the largest of the pioneer film companies. The Great Train Robbery, 1903. Largely because of the Great Train Robbery, Edwin S. Porter is considered the father of cinema as we know it today. The opening scenes seem to show the same movie techniques already established by stage-trained directors. The action is one long take in front of a painted set. But Porter goes further. Through the window, we see a train come in and stop. That is, we think we see it. We'll discuss this shortly. Note the excited eyewitness in the train. This Western quadrille is one of the best-known scenes from early American films, though shot against a painted drop in New Jersey. A tenderfoot is forced by the onlookers to do a jig. Again, spot the passengers moving on board the train. which puffs off in a smooth cut to an actual location, one of the first uses of an outdoor setting in a dramatic rather than documentary connotation. The Delaware and Lackawanna provided free use of its tower and tracks in Dover, New Jersey. The camera was no longer confined by studio walls. Note the tree beyond the window. It has slight movement. It's not painted. It's a separate, double-exposed motion picture. There are few titles. Porter's pictures are quite sufficient to tell his story as he cuts expeditiously from place to place. To contrive this moving background, Porter ran the film through the camera twice. First pass was in the studio against the painted baggage car interior with black velvet covering the open door area at the bottom right. The second pass was on a moving train with the aperture area masked black except for the bottom right area. Today, we call it a matte shot. In his day, Porter was ahead of everybody, except perhaps Méliès, the contemporary French specialist in camera trickery. Now here's another Porter innovation. The camera is on the tender. And as the fireman succumbs to the pummeling, watch closely for what we call a jump cut. There, as the dummy is substituted. Edison Publicity said, "This thrilling scene showing the tender in the interior of the locomotive cab while the train is running 40 miles an hour is a first." The engineer is forced to uncouple the locomotive. Porter dramatizes an experience that many a man in the 1903 audiences had gone through in real life. Train holdups were routine on Western roads. Never before had so many extras been used in a film. The man in the middle, poised to break away, is played by Bronco Billy Anderson, one of 3 or 4 bits he played in the film. Anderson was to go on to star in 300 or more cowboy pictures made by his own company, S&A, of Chicago. Porter understood melodrama as well as mechanical innovation. He depicts dire cruelty to make the audience take sides. Western with a chase was ultimately to be branded as escapist because it depicts scenes of no relation to our average everyday life. But in those days, the West was still being opened, and its adventures were close to day-to-day reality. The robbers take the hijacked engine only as far as the site of their planned rendezvous, a tract of New Jersey woods in later years to be thick with houses and shopping centers. Even in the East in 1903, there were few cars, and it was highly logical to plan the getaway by horseback, though, of course, it was Porter's intention to portray a Western incident anyway. Dance is still in full swing, and the station master is still helpless. The putting together or editing of scenes depicting simultaneous events was to be a basic device of all cinema, but in 1903 it was a breakthrough, as audiences must have sensed, since the great train robbery ran for years. outcomes of the robbery, and the chase is on. The actor doing the next fall off the white horse was not a dummy, but the first live stuntman. There. Mistakenly thinking they've eluded the pursuers, the greedy robbers turn too soon to dividing the loot. Now Bronco Billy Anderson is playing one of the bad guys. Chases were to be perfected shortly by D.W. Griffith, and shootouts by thousands of westerns to follow, all descended from this one by Edwin S. Porter, who ends the film as it started with a close-up for shock effect. Ironically, Porter didn't realize that close-ups could also have heightened the impact of the story itself. That was yet to come. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. Here is one of Mack Sennett's most frantic comedies, with spies, stunt planes, bombs, and Chester Conklin. It is a story of international intrigue. The second nation's arms buyer is Chester Conklin. He's going to memorize the Eagle Plane Factory's top secrets. As Conklin must have said so often when he was in vaudeville and with the Al Barnes Circus, this must be the place. Chester's name in the picture is from his career trademark, the walrus mustache. Though this is a comedy, you'll have to concentrate. The scenes cut fast, and the camera itself was undercranked, speeding up the action. We could have slowed it down, but Sennett wouldn't have liked that. His theory was to not give the audience a chance to dwell on the unlikelihood of what they were seeing. Our heroine is played by Clara Anderson, and her father by Nick Cogley, a Sennett regular. The test pilot is played by William Nixon. The Wright brothers flew in 1903, but it wasn't until 1907 that the public became fully aware of the feat. So this picture came only 10 years after the start of heavier-than-air flying. In those days, it was like building a comedy around the last word in jets or flying saucers. test pilot gives chase in a biplane very close to the original Wright brothers model. The takeoff is for real, but most of these shots show the biplane to be on wires. Here, the sky passing is a double exposure. America wasn't yet in the war, and bombing from the air was still a futuristic concept, so Sennett could employ it for comedy. In most of these shots, the planes aren't turning upside down, the camera is. The concept of parachuting is especially avant-garde. The Germans began using chutes the following year. Those supposed bomb hits are, of course, movie landmines. Sennett uses a combination of miniatures, as here over the bridge, prop planes, and real planes. For the real ones, he maintained his own private skyline in Glendale. First agent finally arrives, and his name doesn't sound any more legitimate than A.C. Walrus. Chester tries to explain he's not the fake, the other guy is. Calculates, I'll take the girl with me, and we'll all fly. The idea of a girl flying was doubly daring in 1916. Women hadn't even started to vote. But not defeated, a statement much as Chaplin might have made when Chaplin left Sennett to go to SNA the year before. Conklin, by the way, who while at Sennett had befriended Chaplin, was to have that friendship pay off 20 years later when, in 1936, Chaplin used him in Modern Times. The real agent having bought the plane, Walrus tries sabotage. At first, the plane flies no more eccentrically than before, passing all tests. But then... the way, Chester's mustache wasn't real, and he wasn't usually recognized on the street without it, so he carried it in his pocket to be able to prove his identity. Like most of the Keystone crew, Chester was a practical joker in real life, too. Once he offered to help Mabel Normand across a mud puddle by spreading his coat a la Walter Raleigh. Mabel stepped and disappeared into a manhole. The girl has the idea of sending up a line with balloons. Chester counters by shooting them. He's discovered. Now the only thing to do is blow up the whole factory. For the simulated jump to the plane. There. Mack Sennett had written the whole picture around the actuality of the scheduled chimney demolition. As it is with many comics, the private life of Conklin was somber. His wife was bedridden 23 years, having joined him at the altar in a wheelchair. He played in very few films after sound came in, but remained popular in Hollywood, playing bits, including Santa Claus, in department stores. And he made a genial appearance with Sennett in the early 50s on This Is Your Life. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. This 1906 Edison film is the first baseball movie, and it was one of the first films to integrate a storyline with newsreel shots. The office boy wants to see the game, and he's got a note from home. The bookkeeper is not impressed. But it works with the boss, and in no time, the happy mourner is at the ballpark. Well, just outside the ballpark. Masked, as if seen through the telescope, This is the actual opening of the 1906 season between the New York Giants and the Pittsburgh Pirates at Coogan's Bluff, which was later the Polo Grounds. It's a welcome home party for the Giants, who had just won the first official World Series. John J. McGraw had become manager in 1903, and he stayed with the Giants until 1932, becoming the all-time champion manager with 10 pennants. The boss, a Giant fan, finds the bookkeeper and secretary also just lost their grandmas. And now a rare shot. The great Christy Mathewson, who won a place in baseball's Hall of Fame by pitching 373 wins in 17 years. It was quite a team. The infield was Dan McGann, Bill Gilbert, Bill Downe, and Art Devlin. Pitcher Joe McGinnity also made the Hall of Fame. Incidentally, the entire gate for the first World Series was $68,500. There's an elevated train of the 9th Avenue extension. Batting now is Honus Wagner of Pittsburgh, who was to win the 1906 National League Batting Championship. A score for Pittsburgh. And now the Giants are up, and it's stocky Roger Bresnahan, catcher who also made the Hall of Fame. Sam Mertes is up now. Another hit. Now in another inning, Bresnahan again. And another hit. The Giants lead. In fact, they win. The bookkeeper must be from Pittsburgh. The score, New York 5, Pittsburgh 3. Lonely Villa was one of D.W. Griffith's most important early pictures. Filmed in 1909, this title is from the 1912 reissue, it was based on an idea by Max Sennett. The future Keystone comedy chief took the idea from a newspaper story about a robbery. Outside a country manor, we see robbers conspiring. The titles, terse as biograph titles were anyway, don't survive. Inside, Robert Cullison, a wealthy businessman, is at home with his family. The maid and the butler are given the night off, after promising to return early the next day when Mr. Cullison's mother is expected to visit. Note the A.B. monogram for American Biograph at the foot of the set to discourage pirate exhibition. The ringleader of the gang, played by Joseph Kirkwood, has been tipped off about the impending visit, and it fits right into their plan to lure Cullison away from the villa. The oldest daughter, supposedly 12 years old, is played by Mary Pickford, although she was already 16. In another film the same year, she played the mother of several children. She was versatile at an early age. The mother is Marion Leonard, who featured one of the loftiest pompadours of the period. The letter, footage of which is missing, is allegedly from Mr. Cullison's mother asking that he meet her in New York on an earlier train. The forgery does the trick, but father is worried about leaving the family alone. In fact, not noticing the peculiar manner of the messenger, he gets out his gun. From which the robber removes the bullets. The smallest daughter is played by Adele DeGarde, and the middle one by Gladys Egan. For some reason, early movie fans preferred little girls to boys on the screen, so Adele and Gladys were featured in every Biograph picture built around a family. This picture was filmed at Cutterbackville on the New Jersey-New York border, one of Griffith's favorite locations. It had scenery, housing, and was happily free of summer boarders. Griffith caused quite a stir there with this car. It was bright red and the first auto in the county. Mary Pickford, out of sight for the moment in the corner, considered the movies quite a come-down at this time, since she'd been featured on Broadway the year before in Belasco's The Warrens of Virginia. And Griffith didn't bolster her spirits when she first applied for work at Biograph. There she is in the middle. He told her she was too short, too fat, and her head too big for her body. However, after Griffith saw the rushes on her first picture, The Violin Maker of Cremona, he astonished his Biograph bosses by putting her under contract at a guaranteed weekly salary of $25. Father is having his own troubles. The actors nicknamed Griffith's car the Red Devil. They weren't too fond of it, since the director and his ace cameraman Billy Bitzer usually rode in it alone, while lesser members of the company joggled along in horse-drawn wagons. They were marooned outside the Village Inn. The exterior was the real Cutterbackville Inn. The interiors are back at the 14th Street, New York City studio. Griffith liked Lonely Villa so much, he revamped it in 1922 as One Exciting Night. The elements were identical, but old-fashioned melodrama was poison then, and the new picture was a flop compared to the big hit this original had been. Griffith builds suspense by intercutting in ever-shortening intervals. This became known as crossback, cutback, and switchback. Cutting before a scene was completed solved a major problem of storytelling in films. It enabled directors to depict two actions taking place simultaneously at different places. Chances are this gypsy camp setting was left over from a picture shot earlier the same week. Griffith had an uncanny sense of timing. Rescue always came at just the right psychological moment of suspense. To this day, the device is known in the trade as the Griffith Last-Minute Rescue. And that is Lonely Villa, made in 1909, reissued in 1912, by D.W. Griffith at the American Biograph Studio. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. Let's go back to the beginning of the silent cliffhangers, with their intrepid heroines of perilous adventure on the installment plan. One of those serial queens was Helen Holmes, and in The Hazards of Helen of early 1914, Helen played a railroad telegraph operator who each week thwarted the crooks. In the pay train episode, Helen has discovered a plot to rob the pay train, but gets locked in a freight car by the bandits before she can sound the alarm. The leader of the heavies is Leo Maloney, later to switch to the right side of the law as a Western star. This series, based on actual cases, was produced by J.P. McGowan, who, well into the sound era, was still making railroad thrillers, such as John Wayne's serial, The Hurricane Express. Turning away from the camera, Helen snips the hem off her petticoat. In its editing and tension-building cross-cutting, The Hazards of Helen was quite superior to most of the other series films and early serials of 1914. With a hairpin, she'll make a grappling hook. Here, Helen is using her brain to outwit the gang. But she was an energetic young lady, and in many another episode, she used brawn as well as brain. The Paymaster. Increasingly large close-ups were used by McGowan to heighten drama and tension. The Lookout. If the signal can be raised, the engineer will be warned something is amiss. Helen's ingenuity pays off. Each little story was complete in itself in these early thriller series. I say series as opposed to the later to-be-continued serials, which established the suspense of uncompleted rescues. Although 1913's The Adventures of Kathleen had been the first real serial, 1914's The Perils of Pauline really put the chapter plays on the map. Here, Pearl White is to be subjected to a fearful ordeal high in the Rockies, impersonated by New Jersey's Palisades. Searching for her nearby is the hero, Crane Wilbur, later to drop acting in favor of writing and direction. Actually, Perils has been elevated to a legendary status it hardly deserves. Crudely made, poorly directed, often with illiterate subtitles, it compares unfavorably with the more polished Helen Holmes extract we just saw. The Perils of Pauline was by no means limited in its action to the Wild West. In later episodes, plucky Pearl battled pirates and gypsies, entered motor races, and went through every adventure in the book for 15 episodes. Series films leading into the serials with the accent on the alls. By 1917, Pearl White was the reigning queen of them all, clinging to wires, clotheslines, or fire escapes in The Fatal Ring, the first serial directed by George B. Seitz. Pearl's big competition was Ruth Rowland, another specialist in railroad thrillers. This episode was directed by no less than the then just starting W.S. Van Dyke. Ruth again, in 1919's Tiger's Trail, written by the famous Arthur B. Reeve and directed by Paul Hearst, who later made a career of playing dumb cops. Serial queens could be toothsome in more ways than one. Now we're up to 1922. The director, Hal Roach. Ruth Rowland stayed with railroading and the outdoors, while the Pearl White stories focused more and more on mystery. By 1927, most of the serial queens had given up their cliffhanging, and cowboy stuntmen like William Desmond became the kings of the Saturday afternoon serials. William Duncan doing a horse-to-train stunt without a double. Wayne Ray and Walter Miller were one of the most prolific serial teams. Walter remained a top-liner in sound serials too, later a villain, and died from injuries received in a fight scene in a Western. All serials had a mystery man, and here's The Professor. The mill race was a popular peril. At this point, a title would say, "Continued next week." In The Shielding Shadow, Ralph Kelland went through the octopus peril, later used by his son Bruce in The Drums of Fu Manchu. To be continued next week. Almost 300 silent serials were made, the best by Pathé and Universal. They provided valuable training for many rising stars and directors. But quite probably, if you were to screen many full episodes, as we have, you'd find it a long wait between climaxes like these. However, the next thrill was usually well worth the long wait in the heyday of the Serial Queens. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. The first movie studio was the Black Maria at Edison's New Jersey laboratory. Here are two of the films made there in the late 1890s. In the first days before films had stories, action subjects and dancing acts were naturals, and New York's colorful Bowery district inspired this tough dance by Babe Johnson. The dance had been introduced in vaudeville by Kid Foley in Sailor Lil and became a national craze. It was the forerunner of the knockdown, drag-out French Apache number, which became a sensation a few years later. And here's the screen's first dancing star, Annabella Whitford, who later became one of Ziegfeld's most glorified beauties. The film was a half-minute screen item interpolated as an act in an otherwise live vaudeville program at New York's Coster and Biles Music Hall in 1896. And now, Edison's one-reel 1915 feature, The Heart of a Waif. This was the period in which actors were first identified on the screen with their roles by titles. Jenkins would probably find it more difficult to adopt a child under the much stricter standards of modern adoption agencies. Edith's curls are copied from Mary Pickford, who was then the idol of every schoolgirl. In fact, almost every young actress wore Pickford curls, from sweet ingenue types like Mary Miles Minter and Marguerite Clark to Theda Bara and Tallulah Bankhead. Kitchens weren't equipped with labor-saving devices, and a woman's work was a back-breaking assignment for a 9-year-old girl. Child labor was exploited on farms and in factories throughout the early 1900s. But in 1912, the forming of the Ohio Children's Code Commission marked the opening of a new era. This film is typical of movies made during the period in support of such child labor legislation. Homeless adults, though, like these two tramps, received scant sympathy from the early movie makers. Writer Richard Neal, who was also a director at Edison, had grown fond of little Edith Peters while making an earlier movie and promised he'd write one just for her. It turned out to be this one. Angry at being kicked off the Jenkins land, the tramps follow the farmer to the bank. Jane got jostled, but not hard enough to smash all those eggs. They were obviously pre-broken for the scene. The store lady is sympathetic, but she can't pay for broken eggs. One would think that in 1915 only a minority had homes. So far we've met the orphan girl, 2 male vagrants, and now Tramps the cat. Animals and children have always been surefire scene stealers. Perhaps you've been noticing the numbers at the bottom left corner of the titles. Here's number 12. Silent titles were shot and processed separately, then spliced into the exhibition prints. The Edison studios saw nothing uncosmetic about showing the audience the title number. And now, as Jane's foster mother blows out the candle, note how much candle power it had. The Edison studio was in the Bronx, and the exteriors were shot right nearby. Full-length features of 5 and 6 reels had arrived on the scene as early as 1912, and by 1915, the year of this short film and also of The Birth of a Nation, one-reel dramatic subjects like this were fast becoming obsolete. Short films survived mainly in the form of elaborate two-reel comedies and serials, the good ones sometimes exceeding the features they supported in box office importance. Edison, one of the companies to stay east after the exodus to California, discontinued production in 1918. Not too many years before this picture, orphans were virtually sold into slavery through the practice of indenture. Charity cases, foundlings, widows, and aged and ailing were auctioned off to local farmers and tradesmen. The lowest bids won, too, since the city fathers agreed to pay bidders an annual sum for the upkeep and wanted to keep the price down. She recalls the minister's words, "Bless them that persecute you." Originally, these scenes were printed on blue stock, creating a convincing nighttime illusion. Jane is hoping the minister can stop the robbery. And now in comes Jane's new school chum, played by then 13-year-old Claire Booth, later to become a leading playwright, the wife of Time Life publisher Henry Luce, and United States ambassadress to Italy, in that order. Before this film, she had been Mary Pickford's understudy in a Belasco stage play, The Good Little Devil. Ironically, Edith Peters, our young leading lady here, chose not to pursue a career. She retired from pictures and married a U.S. Coast Guard captain. Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York City. The Telephone Girl and the Lady, Biograph 1913. The title itself reflects unconsciously the contemporary assumption that a working girl couldn't be a lady. A letter to Mrs. Van Marsh of Beechwood, Long Island. The jewels left for resetting await your convenience. Will you kindly call at our warerooms? The operator already at work is played by Dorothy Farley, and she is joined by the pert and lovely Mae Marsh. The lady is played by Claire McDowell, who had made her first impression on the stage in The Klansman, D.W. Griffith's later film version of which was The Birth of a Nation. After 5 years with Biograph, she graduated to bigger companies and remained active on stage and screen until well into the sound period. Jack Dillon plays the smiling grocer. The rival suitor of May, the smiling sergeant, is played by British actor Alfred Paget. May takes the sergeant to meet her father, who informs her that she is already engaged to the grocer. Plots about telephone girls were to become popular. The new occupation itself suggested excitement, and the stories played up the increasing role of women in the American scene. The theme remained popular long after the novelty of the invention wore off. In 1924, there was a series of two-reelers called The Telephone Girl, written by Darrell F. Zanuck. And in the late 30s, the tradition was maintained with Telephone Operator, in which the girl at Central performed heroically during a flood. The Telephone Girl and the Lady was the forerunner of all of them. The lady leaves her Long Island home for the city. The tersely worded titles, processed originally on separate film rolls with inferior chemicals, disintegrated long ago. We have reshot them verbatim from the actual scenario in the Biograph files. This Fifth Avenue store is not a set. The management was delighted to get the exposure. The watchful eyes, when we get to see them, will be those of Harry Carey, one of Biograph's busiest stars in both villainous and heroic roles, and later to become a top Western star in the strong, silent William S. Hart style. Mrs. Van Marsh drives off. Harry spies the messenger boy's unguarded bicycle and follows her. We are now asked to believe that the 20-odd miles to Beechwood, Long Island is a quick bike ride. At Beechwood, the lady drops her hanky. May retrieves it. The lady recognizes her voice, and May says yes. She works over there at the telephone office. May's mind is still on the sergeant, and Harry's mind is still on those jewels. The film is now at the halfway mark, and none of its plot elements have yet been drawn together into a direct storyline. The explanation is that Supervisor D.W. Griffith was away on the West Coast, leaving the direction in the hands of Tony O'Sullivan. D.W. always worked without scripts, and thus had nothing to leave his sub-director but rough instructions. Not having the same vision as his teacher, O'Sullivan failed to bypass some of the pitfalls of construction and direction. Mrs. Van Marsh sends her personal maid, played by Kate Bruce, to the telephone exchange. Movie tradition dictated that wall safes be hidden behind pictures. The other maid, the pantry maid, Gertrude Bambrick, plays truant with her boyfriend, leaving Claire at the mercy of the bandit. Although Mary Pickford and Lillian Gish are perhaps better remembered, Mae Marsh was considered the #1 actress of the Biograph Company, at this time working primarily under Griffith. Mae Marsh remained one of Griffith's favorite stars through the years in such films as The Birth of a Nation and the 1923 The White Rose. Always a fervent booster of the great director, she was to go on using as late as the 1950s the acting techniques and the bird-like fragility which Griffith had encouraged in her. May, who had called Mrs. Van Marsh to thank her for the present, overhears the robbery and without wasting a moment goes into action. Even with Griffith himself not in residence in the New York studio, his directors knew the suspense-building values of the cross-cutting that he had introduced. Another of the famous Griffithian delays to add to the tension. Improbably, but conveniently, the sergeant is riding past the exchange. Silent films made before the standardization of camera and projection speeds often get shown too fast. We have slowed most of these seeds down to their original speed to try to get a truer impression of how they looked to 1913 audiences. Harry Carey's frequent battles in these early biograph melodramas stood him in good stead in later years when, as a Western hero, he had mighty scraps in each picture. Of course, then he was on the right side of the law and won the fights. Mrs. Van Marsh buys the grocery store and presents it to May's father, clearing the way for May's happiness with the policeman. In 1913, when Biograph made this film on the streets of New York and New Jersey, it had the impact and immediacy of a semi-documentary. And yet, it was really the kind of Cinderella story that audiences then wanted. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York. "1913's Silent Heroes was the last of the Thomas Ince short Civil War films. Tom is played by Tom Chatterton, who was to remain in films until the mid-1940s. His close resemblance to actor-director Frank Borzaghi, who also worked for Ince at this time, has caused some confusion among film historians. Lee again defeated. Jeff Davis calls for more troops. Richmond under siege. A local patriarch asks Tom to enlist. As in many Civil War films, the issue of slavery itself is sidestepped, with the slave depicted as a contented member of the household. Tom's sweetheart is played by Estelle Allen. Ince strove to carry Civil War stories by powerful drama, with the war action often secondary. For the hero to prove that he was not a coward, or to overcome it if he was one of the most popular of the Civil War plots. However, somehow it only applied when Southern honor was at stake. The North's concern with cowardice was to be dealt with in the early 1950s in The Red Badge of Courage, but in very few other pictures. The letter which dropped from Tom's pocket. Dear son Tom, you are not a coward. You belong to the army of silent heroes, of whom there are many on account of this cruel war. Never mind what people say. Your mother cannot last long. She needs you. Help keep her happy until the last. Don't enlist no matter what is said, and don't tell people the reason, as it may get to mother's ears and break her heart. Lovingly, Dad. 1913, most black roles were still being played by white performers in blackface makeup. The mother has been throwing out her medicine. She is determined to make a sacrifice as great as Tom's. Tom, at last, is free to enlist at a price he had hoped not to pay. After the build-up of straight drama, Thomas Ince gets to the action audiences knew would come and which made his early films popular. The carousing Confederate officers are too confused to take command. This and other elements of the story were borrowed by Ince from a contemporary Danish film about the Napoleonic Wars. Unlike Griffith, Ince did not use fast cutting to great creative effect in building excitement, but his action scenes are big and vigorous, staged with care and intelligent camera placement. As Tom and his men prepare to fight in the open, the town sets up barricades. These battle scenes, photographed in 1913, have all the composition and conviction of million-dollar sequences shot many generations later. While D.W. Griffith had little more to say about the Civil War after 1915's The Birth of a Nation, the subject continued to fascinate Ince, who went on to make many full-length Civil War features. One of the last he made before his death in 1924 was Barbara Frietchie. Curiously, in almost all Civil War films, the sympathies and the individual victories, too, have been with the South. Film historians and even sociologists have speculated why a victorious side produced films in which a former enemy is consistently heroic. Lincoln's stricture was to treat the South as though they had never been away, but Hollywood also, perhaps stimulated by Griffith, treated the South as though they had never even lost. As the soldiers rest Tom on the barricade, Ince injects realism with another soldier dying right underneath him. Townspeople wait to honor Tom for his courage. Then, a most imaginative camera angle. In his delirium, Tom sees his mother, a double exposure in 1913, no longer novel, and something to be ready for when a scene started with a large, dark portion of scenery. Bronco was a unit of the Triangle Distribution Group under Griffith, Ince, and Sennett. Triangle was restrained in its showmanship, while other companies touted routine releases as gigantic and sensational. Triangle's marquees flew the slogan, "Clean pictures for clean people." One rival translated this to "dull pictures for dull people," but he was wrong. Only the advertising was dull. Certainly the Civil War dramas of Thomas Ince were not. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York. Thomas Edison had developed a motion picture machine in 1886 and took out patents on it 5 years later. It was only one of thousands of patents filed by the great inventor who experimented for 80 years. This is the Broadway store that was the site of the first kinetoscope parlor in 1894, and a sketch of the machines which mechanized, with film, the illusion of action previously achieved by hand-flipping sequenced photos. Half Half a century later, in the 1950s, Edison's successors in New Jersey restored his Black Maria, the world's first movie studio. The Black Maria's roof opened and it rotated to follow the sun. The first subjects photographed in it were just prize fight reenactments. But before he died, Edison's movies were to be a billion-dollar industry. Sennett's Keystone Studio kidded contemporary happenings as soon as they happened. Here in 1914, they went after patrons of the arts, or, in this case, a patroness, the lady art student, unhappy with her model. The next model candidate looks even more like an insect, a daddy longlegs. It's 6'6", Slim Somerville. The pseudo-French art school teacher is Charlie Chase. "1914 brought a sharp change from the docile Victorian women portrayed in movies until then. It was the year Theda Barras, A Fool There Was, introduced the word vamp and symbolized the aggressive new female spirit. As the lady artist complains to her husband about her male model problems, the Iceman cometh. In the teens, every house had a sign on the porch which said, ice today or no ice today. And in the kitchen, an ice box. Not to mention, in some cases, a maid. Businessman hubby should be leaving for the office. He tells them the Iceman had better goeth. Traditionally, Icemen carried on a dalliance with the female or females of the house. And traditionally, in Senate land, businessmen went to work in spats, top hat, and cane. This Iceman is Charlie Murray, 6 feet, 200 pounds, and an ex-circus performer who had been in vaudeville 20 years. One of the neighbors is worried that her ice is melting. Hubby is so nervous about the Iceman, he left his wallet. Or was it just that the thickening plot will shortly require his presence back home? More neighbors are upset that the Iceman isn't delivering, or that he's delivering too much. Next, Charlie pulls a handshaking bit long standard in vaudeville and later used often by Harpo Marx. Charlie Murray had joined the Biograph Company in 1912. He went west with them for the winter of 1914 and liked the climate so much he stayed. He was already 42 years old. but he reached a career peak even later in the 1920s and 30s in the popular series The Coens and the Killiams. In Hubby's office, an early forerunner of the insolent, gum-chewing stenographer character, later elaborated on by a number of leading comedians. Characters in Sennett's Keystone comedies flourished guns as casually as handkerchiefs. But audiences knew that he knew that they knew there weren't real bullets in them. Of course, there aren't real bullets in any movie guns, but in serious movies, we're supposed to think there are. Wifey thinks the Iceman is still there and that she'll have to hide him. But he isn't. Whatever the story, or should we say premise rather than story, a Sennett comedy called for a street chase. Some of these frontages on Hollywood and Sunset Boulevards and Vine and Gower Streets are still recognizable. Now, to get back in supposedly the same house he first approached from his ice wagon via its back porch, Charlie climbs a fire escape from the boulevard sidewalk. Lack of congruity bothered neither Sennett nor audiences, so long as things kept moving. Now we have Sennett's twist on the farcical wheeze of the surprised alleged lover hiding under a bed. Charlie hides in the bed, and the bed itself hides. Murphy beds, which folded up into the wall, were the latest thing when this film was made, and Sennett goes one better, sliding it through the wall. Charlie Chaplin did a 5-minute routine with a folding Murphy bed that wouldn't stay put. As so often happened in Keystone one or two reelers, there was no way of tying up the loose ends of the largely improvised plot. So they end with a free-for-all. That's Cursed by His Beauty. Not exactly a method-acting masterpiece, but loaded with the raw materials of generations of slapstick comedies to follow. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection in New York. The very first movies were mere bits of passing movement, but in the early 1900s, film subjects evolved into real-life scenes, such as this 1903 vignette of boys at the old swimming hole. The footage, a single take, was shot near Edison's studio in West Orange, New Jersey, and unlike earlier Edisons, it carries a slight plot and even some sociological overtones, as a grouchy owner is outwitted by the frolicking kids. Later the same year, Edison's top director, Edwin S. Porter, produced his first one-reel story films, including The Great Train Robbery. Actors were low men on the payroll in 1903, and the policeman was probably the only one in the picture who got paid. And now, a delightful 1910 morality film. Winning Back His Love was one of the first film versions of a marital plot device long used, with many variations, on the stage. Departing friend Tom is played by James Kirkwood. Husband George is Wilfred Lucas, first biograph player to make $150 a week. In 1910, it was not abnormal for a couple merely entertaining a friend with a quiet dinner at home to be in full dress. Mary is played by Stephanie Longfellow, an actual niece of the poet. "1910 audiences were familiar with the interior set in Biograph's 14th Street studio with the grandfather clock and the AB logo on the flat. The stage door was a real location, familiar to stage door Johnnies, if not to Biograph audiences. We think it is the Hippodrome on 6th Avenue at 44th Street. George's late date, Vera, is played by Vivian Prescott, one of Biograph's most popular actresses. At her apartment, Vera has a maid, played by Jean McPherson, who later became one of Hollywood's highest-paid writers. One of her scripts was DeMille's The Ten Commandments. George hesitates, not because he's hesitant, but because of censorship. From 1908 to 1914, the movies often tried to preach. And when George does leave, Vera hasn't even removed her hat. The year this picture was made, the Chicago censors banned the song, I Love My Wife, But Oh, You Kid. Stephanie Longfellow made it on her own, not just because of her name, as in 1910 cast names weren't advertised, but she chose to retire early from the screen in 1915. George's explanation is accepted. George and Mary's butler brings in a message, the original footage of which doesn't survive, and we've composed one we hope is at least in the spirit of the original. There was a fad at this time of lovers' baby talk, and shortly after this film, the country was singing Irving Berlin's hit song, Snooky Ookums. The spouse with the roving eye has been a staple character since the beginning of drama, but movie morality was strict when D.W. Griffith directed this picture, and it could be only the husband who strayed, while the wife wept and waited. Miss Longfellow's acting may seem a bit broad here, but divorce was then considered a disgrace, so the histrionics are not entirely out of order. Friend Tom volunteers to help. And Mary has to ask herself whether Tom is as interested in her as he is in helping her with George. George is a little nervous about being seen, even by the stage doormen. Now Mary will go along with Tom's scheme. Tom and Mary already have a reading on where George conducts his late-night business engagements. A table for two for George and Vera. And for Tom and Mary, also a table for two. Split scenes with an imaginary partition or curtain had been common on stage, and worked well for the camera, too. While the movies were still a brand new medium, the writers, actors, and directors were all stage-trained people. Inevitably, films like this were virtually photographed plays. A new wave of writers who grew up with the movies would soon emerge and write specially for the mobility of the new medium. Among them, Anita Loos, who joined Biograph at about this time. The dramatic device of curing the errant husband goes way back, probably to Aristophanes or the Elizabethans or the Restoration, were we to research it all the way. Certainly the spouse with the roving eye was standard in the late 19th century French farces of Feydeau. Or, for the specific ploy of mates overhearing one another in adjacent cafe booths, how about Hello Dolly, which came from Thornton Wilder's Matchmaker, which came from Wilder's own 1938 play The Merchant of Yonkers, directed by Max Reinhardt, which Wilder himself took from the 1842 Viennese play Einen Jux as Sick Machen, which had been based on the 1835 London play A Day Well Spent by John Oxenford, and so on back through the dramas and novels of centuries. D.W. Griffith, for all the new techniques and directorial freedoms he developed, both at this time and later, made dozens of these rather confined morality movies, the drunk learning his lesson, the thief making amends, or, as here, the husband finding out the errors of his ways. Significantly, it was in the summer of this same year, 1910, that Griffith accepted motion pictures as a career by abandoning his pseudonym Lawrence and signing a third biograph contract with his real name, David Wark. In 1910, films, a husband might indicate an interest in another woman and be forgiven. But if a wife strayed, she would be punished by death or worse. Movie Museum, presenting rare original footage from the first quarter century of motion pictures, selected from the archives of the Killiam collection. Fatima's Danse du Ventre. Sound exotic? Well, it was exotic back in 1896, so exotic that it had to be bleeped for movie exhibition. Those white lines aren't offense, they're censorship. 1896 was the year when movies were first shown in public on screens. The only subjects available at first were one-minute items which Thomas Edison had made previously for peep show kinetoscope machines. Some of the subjects which had been passable for the kinetoscopes were a little too risque for mass viewing, even in the supposedly gay 90s, and the result was that they were fixed up. Not re-routined or re-photographed, just fixed, as Fatima's Dance was here. The dance had been a big hit at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, and it was then photographed by Edison in the famous Black Maria, the world's first motion picture studio. Fortunately, we still have in our vaults the negative of Fatima's Dance uncensored, as originally made for the kinetoscopes. Of course, the movies have changed a lot over the years, but the dance routine itself has held up quite well. And now one of the very first aerial screen dramas. Dash Through the Clouds is a most unusual early film, a documentary with a storyline. The flyer, or as the biograph Scenario described him, quote, the aeroplane driver, unquote, is not a professional actor. Movie makers of the day saved money and made more exciting scenes by bringing in trains, ships, and planes and augmenting the professional actors with specialists, such as this handsome aviator. A title is missing, which introduced a friend of the pilot who tried to get Chubby out of the way. The 1912 biograph publicity played up the girl's, quote, fascination with the new sport of aeroplane riding, unquote. Mabel Normand was the Lucille Ball or Carol Burnett of her day, and it's Mabel, not a double, up in the plane. Though, of course, the closer shots were made on the ground. They didn't even set up a fan to give them a wind-blown look. The picture was made in June of 1911 during one of the first Western junkets of the New York-based Biograph Stock Company. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to pinpoint this particular Los Angeles flying field. Nor have we been able to identify the pilot. As you may have noticed, he had the lanky, modest manner for which we remember Charles Lindbergh. But Lindbergh didn't even start flying lessons till 10 years after this picture was made, and it was 15 years later when he flew solo to Paris. This arbor isn't scenery. The local owner let it be used without charge, which helped a lot on the film's $300 budget. Another jump cut, which showed another original title to be missing. Presumably, the arbor set is Josephine's house, and it's right by the airfield. She'd like to log a few more hours. Silent film titles could support or retrieve unlikely or missing story elements. Chubby is played by Fred Mace, who was to enjoy a fruitful career with Mack Sennett, who was also still with Biograph at this time. Josephine is in love. The Mexican lad, played by Jack Pickford, is trying to tell Chubby that the incensed Chicanos are coming after him. Carmelita is played by Mrs. Dell Henderson. The boy seems to be some kind of a double agent. Dash Through the Clouds, one of the biographs not directed by D.W. Griffith, is more important today for these street scenes of Los Angeles in 1911, and of course the flying scenes, than for its story, direction, or acting. This dashing, for example, is not in the clouds, but in the still unpaved Los Angeles suburbs. The note insert was updated for the 1912 reissue. Biograph publicity promised this was a takeoff on the Mexican revolts, then much in the news. Josephine has guns and would like to travel by air. Story-wise, we're supposed to believe Josephine and the flyer would risk their necks to save a dumb gum salesman in trouble over a rotund rebel across the border. But plots of many a much later TV sitcom were to be just as flimsy. The next shot at first will look as though it was made from another plane, but the camera was on top of one of Hollywood's hills. This is genuine, old-time hedge hopping. Only crop dusters would fly like this today. Later on, audiences were to become accustomed to rescues by helicopter, jet, or even spaceship. But in 1911 and 1912, this was a novelty that had them gasping. Chubby is glad to see Josephine, but sorry to hear her decision to go off with the airman and give Chubby the air. Chubby dashes back to Carmelita. Biograph billed this film as, quote, a farce comedy of a melodramatic type that has thrill in every foot, unquote.